So someone on my page asked the question, why does the mainstream media ignore alternative economic approaches such as modern monetary theory? As a professor that teaches lots of different theoretical worldviews, I'm going to answer this question by turning to the work of Antonio Gramsci and his understanding of hegemony. So traditionally, hegemony referred to dominance through material power, for example, a country having more guns and more cash. But Gramsci comes along with his wonderful hairline and asks us to consider how dominant groups within countries get their position through consensual means. He argued that elites project a political vision and ideology which claims to speak for all. So when Donald Trump is saying, "Make America Great Again," alarm bells should be ringing in your head because he's working to serve the interests of the elite. But to go back to the start, what has all this got to do with the media? Noam Chomsky argues that even in liberal democracies where we think we're not under the influence of propaganda, these states seek to manufacture consent. He argues that a media is to democracy what violence is to a totalitarian regime. If you think this all sounds crazy, I just want you to walk into a newsagent and buy a non-neoliberal newspaper or magazine. So you think you've got choice, but from a Marxist perspective, this is really just an illusion. Well, at one end of the spectrum, you've got something like The Guardian, and really what's their big aim? To increase minimum wage? And on the other end of the spectrum, you've got a doubling down of free market. So either way, they're just reproducing this narrow neoliberal economic framework and not offering you radical alternatives. This is not to suggest that these ideas aren't out there, it's just that they're often on the periphery rather than in the mainstream. In terms of the start, Stephanie Kelton, Bernie Sanders' economic advisor, has been at the vanguard of modern monetary theory. This is the idea that governments shouldn't worry about deficits like the current Labour government in the UK. They should spend big on the right things and only get concerned if inflation increases. Interestingly, it has broken into the mainstream, as highlighted by the fact that it was a New York Times bestseller, but really it's been presented as some unorthodox radical way of thinking when it's not that radical at all. In fact, in a series of interviews, Kelton acknowledged that Biden implicitly had invoked many of these underlying policies. Despite not being that radical, look how it was interpreted. Donald Trump over here declares Bernie Sanders crazy Bernie, which is a classic example of the mainstream seeking to delegitimize alternative ways of thinking. To go back to Gramsci, this is how hegemony works. This isn't to suggest that Gramsci and Chomsky, etc. are correct. I'm a professor, not a priest. I'm not trying to condition you into a certain way of thinking. This is why I introduce students to a range of thinkers and a range of concepts in international politics. But if you ask me why the mainstream media marginalizes alternative ways of thinking, then I think that hegemony helps shine a light on this.